Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Aaron Estrada, the president and founder of the Military History Club. I'm very pleased to see you all today, but before we start, I just want to state our house rules. Please practice and observe respectful comments and refrain from using offensive language during our webinar. Our club is devoted to bringing young historians together to learn, share, and analyze various conflicts throughout military history. I hope you will enjoy and learn from this webinar. For that, I'm now turning over the floor to our new host, Alex Kachumian. Alex?
Thank you. Good morning, Hoover students and teachers. My name is Alex Kachumian, the new host of the Military History webinar, Hoover High School Military History webinar. I know that you are all excited today to see and hear our special guest speaker, but give me this opportunity to thank Mr. Umansky, our club sponsor, for his overwhelming support. Furthermore, on behalf of the club, we would like to thank Dr. Earl, Captain Lowe, social studies teachers, and Hoover students for joining us. Our guest speaker today is an author and a military historian dedicated to the history of MACV-SOG. He was the 4th CERT commander and instructor in San Quentin State Prison located in Northern California. He teaches CERT advanced academies and basic and advanced sniper schools. He also attended FBI sniper school and went to various SWAT-related trainings. But most of all, he is the son of an American hero, Paul Christensen, a MACV-SOG soldier during the Vietnam War. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to introduce Mr. Bruce Christensen, our honored guest speaker today. Let's give him a round of applause.
Hello, everyone.
I'm now turning over the floor to Mr. Christensen.
Okay, so let me just kind of jump into the history of MACV-SOG, how it kind of all got started. By the way, yesterday was the birthday of MACV-SOG, established 24th of January, 1964. But let's go prior to that, what was going on in Vietnam. So as you guys know, we were in Vietnam 54, excuse me, 59. We had mostly advisors there. As a matter of fact, my dad was there in 62 as a special forces medic, his first tour in Vietnam. But during 1961, there was a CIA operation called White Star. So White Star was mostly in Laos, because what was going on, there was a couple of neutral countries, Laos and Cambodia. But as we know that the Vietnamese, North Vietnamese, could care less about neutrality, and they were sending troops and supplies, called the Ho Chi Minh Trail, through Laos and Cambodia. So the CIA wanted to find out more about what was going on there, and they developed White Star, utilizing mostly special forces troops and indigenous. So, but the law states that if a unit got so big that the military would have to take it over. And that's what happened. There was multiple operations going on throughout the different countries. So MACV-SOG was established. They first were going to call it Special Operations Group. And they had used Special Operations Group in Korea as well. But then they wanted to make it more of like bookkeepers, like people that were just studying what was happening, and not these commando guys that were going around the jungle and doing all these secret missions. So they called it the Studies and Observation Group. So basically, on paper, it would look like it was just a bookkeeper kind of guys that were just like, you know, keeping track of things. Far from that, but so what happened, they decided to make 3 bases, basically. One was in Da Nang, CCN. It was called different things over the time. So it started out with FOB4. There was one in Kontum. There's Mylock or Quezon. On the Marine Corps base, they had a special forces camp within the Marine Corps base. And then after the Marines left, special forces left too, and they put the base in Mylock. And then there was a lot of launch sites, forward optimization bases, we call them FOBs, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Later on, MACV-SOG changed over to consolidated CCN, CCC, and CCS. Command and Control South, Command and Control Central, Command and Control North. Later on, but then it was changed over once again to what they call Task Force Advisory Element 1, 2, and I think there was a 3. And that was towards 1970 and the 72. So basically around 72 is when MACV-SOG was disbanded. However, there were still operations going on, but it wasn't under the SOG. So typically, you had to do a couple things to get into SOG. One is no one talked about it. So you heard these rumors, well, the guys that were in SOG, when they're at Fort Bragg, they're going through Q course, become a special forces guy. You would hear these rumors. They would say, hey, what's SOG all about? And they would say, well, whatever you do, don't go into SOG. Go get a A-team or something in Vietnam. But so you had to volunteer, basically, volunteer for the Army. You had to volunteer for jump school. You had to volunteer for special forces training. And then when you got in the country, they brought you into Nha Trang. That's the 5th Special Forces headquarters. And they bring you in and they would ask for volunteers for a secret project, which they couldn't talk about. But if you want to volunteer, you could, you'd sign up, and then they bring you into another room and they would tell you what it was all about. So a lot of guys, they volunteer for SOG, then you got to SOG, and then basically there was support units, of course. There was intelligence. With my dad, he was S2. They had a supply. They had the team, the Recon Teams, and they had other different teams, but mostly the Recon Teams, which comprised of generally 2 to 4 Americans, and then up to like 6 indigenous. But generally they travel 2 Americans and 4 indig. So the indig could be South Vietnamese. It could be Montagnards, different tribes of Montagnards. Then they had the Hu Choi, which were North Vietnamese that were captured, put into prison camp, and then they became SOG warriors. So they fought for SOG against the North Vietnamese. So they paid well. The indigenous were paid well. They had kids, sometimes 14 years old, on these teams fighting alongside the Americans. So the way a SOG team operated, what they let me tell you what they did. So they, it was mostly intelligence. When they went to Laos, Cambodia, North Vietnam, they didn't want to be seen. They weren't there to engage in firefights. They weren't there to, just mix it up. Their whole job is to get in there, look at a bomb. When they did a B-52 arc-light strike, they would go in there and see what the damage was. They would do wiretaps on the NVA radio lines. They would do prisoner snatches. They would do, if a pilot was shot down, they would try to go get him, or at least get to the plane. They would, they did a lot of POW attempts, rescues, but there was never American rescue during the Vietnam War. Some escaped, but none were rescued. Some Vietnamese were rescued though by the SOG guys. So you would go into the meeting, generally the 1-0, who was a team leader. So if you're a 1-0, you're in charge of the team, then you had a 1-1, who was your backup, and a 1-2, generally the radio guy. So you could be a sergeant and be the 1-0 team leader, and you could have a captain on your team who was the 1-1 or 1-2. So rank didn't apply in SOG. It was your time on the field, a time in the woods, and your experience and knowledge. So if a guy that was a lieutenant came onto the team, he would automatically take the lesser roles. It's not lesser, it's just that there always could only be one leader, 1-0. And then the Vietnamese, it was opposite. They would have a team leader 0-1 and all the way down. So equipment wise, you can wear just about anything you want, as long as it was sterile. No dog tags, no pictures, no books you wrote in, except for taking notes while you're out in the field. They all had cameras, and all their uniform was sterile, as I said. So a lot of it was made in Okinawa, Japan, by CIA Cisco. Knives, machetes, clothing. Some wore just OD greens with no patches, no name tags, etc. Some wore tiger stripes. Some wore MVA uniforms. A lot of the guys said that it would give them a split second more chance if MVA walked up on them. They wouldn't think, or was this one of our guys? And then we would give the SOG guys a chance to shoot them down, because they know, as you know, if you go into a country as a soldier and you're wearing civilian clothes or uniform of opposite force, you're a spy and you get executed. Well, the SOG, they never captured SOG guys. They always executed them. There was only one guy who was captured and sent to the POW camp in the history of SOG. Most times they were executed, or some people think some were captured and sent to Russia for interrogation. And they also believe a lot of pilots who had knowledge of different planes were shipped off to Russia during that war. So the equipment wise, you can wear whatever you want, any kind of gun. A lot of them carried Swedish Ks, some machine guns, Car 15s was a big choice. They had a nice little suppressor on the end. AK-47s, most of them carried different pistols of some sort, grenades, CS, chemical agents, tear gas, mini V40 grenades, little tiny ball grenades, regular size grenades, claymores, generally one canteen, and some indige sea rats. And basically that was like what the Vietnamese ate, of rice and fish and such. Because when they're out in the field for 2 to 3 days before you went out, you wouldn't shower, you wouldn't put it in deodorant, you would only eat Vietnamese food. That way the NVA couldn't smell you. As an American, run through with the aftershave on. So a lot of little tricks they did. And then what happened was they would land in 3 or 4 different LZs. And if there was 4 LZs, 3 would be false landing. Then they would land in the LZ, and then the team would get off, work for the woods, and then they'd wait and just listen. And then if they heard no voices, no gunshots, no dogs, no whistles, then they would give a team okay, and the search helicopters would fly away. There was always a cubby, a FAC flying with a cubby rider, and a cubby rider is it was a special forces guy. He generally was a 1-0 at one time, and then he was in the fixed airplane, and they wouldn't fly over the team, but they would fly nearby, and so they would direct any assistance they needed. So the way it worked is they were so far in Laos, Cambodia, the radios wouldn't work as far as going all the way back to Da Nang or somewhere. So the guys on the ground would talk to the FAC would talk to the helicopters, or the fast movers, the jets and stuff, if they needed help. So a lot of times they get into these LZs, and right away they're compromised. It turned out later that there was double agents in SOG, Vietnamese, and they were supplying the North Vietnamese with all the different locations where the teams were going to be inserted. And then, so a lot of times they would get into an LZ, they would be shot at right away, then they would have to board, or they get on the ground, then they would have a running fight. And once that happened is the teams would call, of course, the FAC. The FAC would call in Cobras. They would call in the A1 Sky Raiders, which are slow and low and have a lot of ordnance, which the SAW guys like the most. The fast movers were the Jets, dropping napalm and 250-pound bombs. And basically, that's the only way the SAW guys survived. A lot of times they were outnumbered 100 to 1, 1,000 to 1. And one time, at least one time, a regiment was going after these 6 guys. So in order to get out, they would have to just bomb as much as they could and evade and get to another LZ. And then the helicopters would come in and either land or drop ropes. So basically you had different types of ropes over the years, stable rigs. And so the ropes would come down and you would hook into the ropes and the team would be inserted up through the canopy. And a lot of times they were bounced off the different canopy. And as far as, because the pilots, if they couldn't go straight up or they were getting shot at too much, they would have to go forward to get the speed. And then these SAW guys were bouncing around the trees and some were, knocked off the ropes and then, eventually the guys got knocked off the ropes, or a lot of them were killed. And then they would fly back all the way back to South Vietnam before they would land. So as you guys know, once you're elevated, and especially running through the jungle when you're sweating because it's hot down there and you get up into the atmosphere, it's very cold. I've done that. I went through a river once and a helicopter picked us up and went up high, and then my teeth were just chattering like they were almost going to break each other. But that's what happened with these guys. It'd be almost hypothermic, and then they would land and they would drop them on the tarmac, and that's how they got out if they didn't get in the helicopter. So that was the only means getting into South, North Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia. As you know, there's no tanks, no trucks, no other way. It was always a helo. And then, so as far as the missions go, they did a lot of experimental things. They had shoes with they tried this with just a foot on the bottom of the shoe. That way the North Vietnamese thought it would be just a guy walking around barefoot, but it was very uncomfortable, didn't work. They were able to try a bunch of equipment, McGuire rig, stable rigs. So a lot of things they still use today were made by SAW guys. They would come up with something and they would take it to Okinawa and they would make different items for them. They made what they call the Night Gale. So the Night Gale was a big box, a piece of wood, 4 feet by 4 feet, and they would put firecrackers and other types of explosives on a daisy chain. And what they do, go to like a false LZ, they would drop it out, and it would sound like there's a big firefight going on, which would drive the North Vietnamese towards the firefight. Meanwhile, they're inserting into another area. Other inserts they tried were they did some stack line jumping of helicopters. They did one where they had a B-52 or some large plane fly over with a 500-pound bomb. So the thing was they were going to do is drop the bomb, and then it would make an LZ, and then the team would insert right away. And I know John Meyer, his team was RT Idaho. They did one of those. And there was a problem with it when they dropped. They're about to come out. They noticed that there was tons of NVA running around after they dropped the bomb. I think they aborted. And the other one, they decided in 1970 that there would be compromise of all LZs. The NVA knew who they were coming. So Chief of SOG at the time, he got these guys from CCN and CCC to go to Okinawa to start halo jumping. And then they did their first combat halo jump in 1970 in Laos. It was 3 Americans, and there was 4 in Dig, and then 1 South Vietnamese officer. So the very first one is 2 o'clock in the morning during a storm, raining hard. They jump out. They can't see each other. They get all scattered. Everyone lands different locations 2 miles from the objective. Eventually, well, they had a little transponder. But what happened is Cliff Newman, the first guy out, the team leader, he had this box that the other people, you turn on the transmitter and the other ones follow these beeps. But he landed in a river. So that got short circuit. So these guys were scattered around. They eventually found, one would find another, and they kind of hooked up that way. I think they had to make 3 insertions to get them out, 3 different locations. So there was a total of 5. The team was never seen as far as by the MVA. So they call them successful missions. The last one, they got into a big firefight, and then one guy was he ended up in a tree, and they didn't know where he was. When they went back with the bright light team, that he was missing. They can see the shells in the jungle, and then you saw the parachute, but the guy was missing. Never heard from him again. He's still POW MIA. And then, but I think the last 2 were really successful, is landing near each other. I know the last guy, a guy named Howard Sugar, he came up, put a chem light on his ruck when he was jumping, and that way the other team members could follow him because he had the chem light on his back, and they all landed together. What I just mentioned, the bright light. So what a bright light is, it's a team always standing by, and they go to the rescue of a team that was compromised. So if a team got overrun or about to be overrun, they would send in a bright light team. But also bright lights teams were for down pilots if they crash and try to go get them or recover the bodies. Bright lights were also if they found that there was good evidence there was a POW camp somewhere, they would send in a bright light team to try to rescue them. So that's what bright light did. And then within SOG, there was different elements. So you had recon teams, you had larger companies, they call them exploitation teams. You had your hatchet teams. Hatchet teams are generally a large team, and if you needed a hatchet team, you would go in and they did like they would go up on top of a mountain or place, and they would watch the MVA. They would dig in. They generally have a lot of weapons, and they would dig in, and they watch the MVA in their trucks, and they would call in the bombers come bomb the trucks and stuff. But generally, those guys were always compromised. They all knew where they were because it was such a big team that went in. But it was very successful as far as blowing up trucks and what have you.
All right.
So, and
Bruce, I
yes,
think because we don't have any time, but I think we would like to proceed to the questions and answer portion.
sure, yeah.
So many students want to ask. So for those who wants to ask questions, you can unmute and then say your questions. Anybody?
You can also raise your hand and ask the question in chat if there's anyone that wants to ask.
I think there's none, but yeah. Since we don't have any time, but thank you for your time, Bruce.
Not a problem.
We're gonna. Oh, Alex. Okay. Do you have a question, Alex?
Yeah, I'm gonna put it in chat.
but he's gonna put it in the chat.
All right, it's fine. So, for MACV-SOG, is that tier one or tier two?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
Sorry, I said so. For MACV-SOG, was it tier one or tier two?
Let me pull this up. I still didn't catch that last part.
All right. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm asking, was MACV-SOG tier one or tier two?
Well, they didn't have such. It would be what they would call a tier one. So it was it was the most. It'd be like your Delta Force now, your Navy SEALs. They did have a lot of SEALs in MACV-SOG as well, because they wanted to get the experience what the SOG guys were doing. So it would be a tier one type of team. So, and the other aspect of MACV-SOG and why it wasn't known for a long time is it was classified for 20 years. So there was nothing written about it. They would, you had to sign some paperwork saying if you talked about it, you would go to prison. So it wasn't until the 80s when the first books started coming out. And but they did have, starting in 77, a convention called Special Operations Association that all the SOG guys would start going to. They still have it today. But yeah.
Thank you.
All right, so we're gonna proceed to the presentation of certificate. Let's see. So Alex, you do the honors, please.
Excuse me, let me find the certificate. One moment.
No problem.
All right. Herbert Hoover High School Military History Club Certificate of Appreciation is proudly presented to Bruce Christensen for sharing his personal military history expertise on MACV-SOG during the second military history webinar, given this 25th day of January 2022. Thank you, Mr. Christensen.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much. I wish that there's more time to discuss, and yeah, it's very interesting to know what's the significance of the MACV-SOG, what they do or what their contributions during the Vietnam War. So I'm very grateful to you, Mr. Bruce, and hope to see you again soon, maybe during the summer. I'm gonna visit you again. Oh, by the way, Alex, show your rank, the colonel one.
So I'm wearing an HU right now at Aaron's request. I got the Colonel patch with me.
Yeah,
that Aaron
that's from Bruce.
gave me as a gift.
Okay. Yeah.
Remember
Oh, was
that?
it?
Yeah, I bought it from Bruce
Well,
Shot.
oh, cool. Thank you, Bruce. I appreciate it.
No worries. Glad you like it.